Hello and welcome to today's How to Get More Out of Public Cloud Tech Tuesday webinar brought to you by Insight Cloud and Data Center Transformation Division. I'm Amanda Sharp, Marketing Specialist at Insight, and will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast console is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. All questions from this webcast will be captured. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn this presentation over to our presenter, Scott Cameron. Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody coming out to the webinar today. I'm going to be talking about how you can get more value out of public clouds. And I want to really specify clouds means Azure, AWS, GCP. We're talking about public clouds. Some of this applies also to private cloud. Don't be deceived. Down there it says I'm Azure lead. That is not specifically what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about all clouds. This is all relevant to all of them. So here's the secret formula. I'm going to give it to you right at the beginning for how you maximize your cloud value. It's a combination of increasing your capability. So that's net new functionality that you can provide, increasing customer engagement, designing new products faster, anything that lets you accelerate your business. Increasing the maturity of how you're leveraging public cloud is a big lever for getting the most value out of your cloud platform. If you don't understand the functionality and how to best leverage it, you're going to be paying a lot more than you need to run workloads in the cloud. You can also control costs and minimize complexity to increase the net value you get out of cloud. In many cases, you can lower costs through operational expenditures that would normally be very large capital expenditures. Think about the 3 to 5 year renewal cycle for data centers and all the equipment that you have to buy. Cloud has the potential of decreasing those costs if it's used effectively, and we'll talk more about that later. And then complexity. A lot of my customers come to me and say, you know, we don't think we can do cloud because we've got broken processes. We, can't even do normal, IT support and service management, at the level that we would like to. How are we going to do this? Well, cloud is actually the perfect opportunity for you to design a parallel infrastructure that has that governance, cost, policy, all the basics, the foundation of how you would deliver IT services. You can build that in parallel, and then you can move into it. And then as you move your existing infrastructure into that well-governed environment, you naturally decrease the complexity and the overhead of managing that infrastructure. So this is the secret formula. I will refer back to this later, and let's dive in a little bit deeper on it. The total cost of ownership for public cloud, I've depicted here on a curve. And if you look at the left, the traditional data center costs, you've done some optimization there. You have scale probably in your current data center, but you're looking at moving to the cloud, and maybe you decide to do a lift and shift. Well, you've got a green star if you look here for good design and planning, because you need to do that before you go to the cloud. Don't do it after you go to the cloud. You'll see what happens there next. And then what happens is, generally, when you lift and shift using infrastructure as a service, your actual cost for owning that infrastructure increases when you take it to the public cloud. And here's why. Public cloud is not a data center, and you shouldn't treat it as such. The way that you pay for services in the public cloud, you pay for every second you consume those resources. And you can consume, megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes of storage, and you pay for every single bit and byte. So you have to be careful what you put out there, and if you just lift and shift everything, you're going to pay. So how do you get more value out of cloud? Well, you can optimize your workloads. You can right-size the compute and storage for your servers. You can automate the availability of that infrastructure. Some things don't need to run 24/7. This is where you really start getting value out of public cloud. And finally, down there to the bottom right, you'll see transformed apps and advanced platform services. This is treating cloud like cloud. This is you leveraging native functionality in the cloud platform, and that's where you get the most potential value out of the cloud. Now, I promise to show you what it's like if you don't do good design and planning. Here's what it looks like. If I don't do any of the upfront work and I just lift and shift my stuff up to the cloud and I let it loose in my organization and say, go to town, I give it to the dev teams and they start consuming it without me having the proper governance and controls in place first, my costs can balloon. Some of the higher end instance sizes for infrastructure as a service that have GPUs and are designed for ERP and other, advanced compute workloads can cost you thousands of dollars per hour and can totally blow your entire budget for your cloud infrastructure OpEx costs in a month to 3 months that maybe you were planning on having last for an entire year. So, at this point, yes, maybe you're in trouble, but you still have an opportunity to pull it out with some good governance. So if we've implemented good governance, we're on the downward trend in the curve, and then we can start to catch up as we optimize our workloads and we automate availability. Eventually, we get to about the same place as if we had done the work in advance, but it cost us a lot more to get there, and it was probably a lot more painful. I like to talk about IT rituals. This is things that you're doing now that maybe you don't even know that you're doing. It's the design principles, engineering principles you have in on-premises data centers. And your teams are fantastic at delivering those services, at racking and stacking components, at configuring, loading operating systems, doing switches and hardware-related tasks in your data centers, energy, cooling, all those things. But do they have the skills that they need to be able to operate in cloud? Are there rituals, things that they do on a daily basis that need to change if you add a new kind of platform where you're consuming as an operational expenditure instead of having traditional capital infrastructure that you've purchased and then you can consume 100% of until it's time to add more capability. That may be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years that you have that infrastructure and you bought it, so you might as well consume all of it, right? There's no reason to only consume, half of what you purchased if you purchase it all in advance. But if you're paying as you go, it really changes the equation in how you need to consider providing IT services to your organizations. So I'm going to move on here to increasing your capabilities with cloud. That's one of the ways that we have to provide additional value back to the organization. Really, public cloud is a foundation for other things. Just getting to public cloud may be, your goal, but once you're there, there's so much more you can do with it. Once you get your data into the cloud, you can unlock the power of that data through artificial intelligence and machine learning. Internet of Things, you can gather data from the field and then you can mash it together with other data and do fantastic things, build new applications. And that's driving net new value and capability to your organization. It's allowing you to create new service and product offerings for your customers. And then infrastructure as code is important because it allows you to standardize and repeatedly produce infrastructure. And you can version that infrastructure so that you can track changes over time, walk back changes if you need to, see how it progresses over time and how you develop out your environments. So these capabilities are going to serve to accelerate your ability to deploy infrastructure that supports your business. Think about you have dev teams that right now submit a request for new infrastructure, virtual infrastructure, physical infrastructure, whatever, and maybe it takes certainly days, but generally weeks or months to get that new capability deployed. If you've got a good private cloud infrastructure and a very well-maintained data center, maybe you can do it in days or minutes, but generally there's a change process there and it takes a while to get these things done. When you get to public cloud and you automate and you start using infrastructure as code and scripting, you can deploy that same infrastructure in seconds and you can have workflow associated with it, with approvals, and you can have all the policy and controls and security built in to the definition of the services that you're provisioning in the cloud. When you go to cloud, you can increase capability through through speed and additional functionality, and you need to have good governance. There's several levers that you have here, and really these are kind of foundational core values of how to get the most value out of cloud. So you can standardize and templatize your infrastructure. I just talked about that a little bit, defining your infrastructure with code. We're talking about software-defined infrastructure, software-defined everything. You can use the native cloud functionality, and I talked about that a little bit earlier, where you have APIs for cloud-native capability that each of the cloud providers have. This could be anything from content distribution networks to ways for you to integrate the building of additional infrastructure into your applications and have the applications responsive to the performance requirements of the application. You can go agile and leverage DevOps. Project management changes a little bit when you have a platform that moves and acts more like code, and you can probably do a lot more with cloud effectively if you use an agile methodology for how you're going to deploy infrastructure. Here's an example. When I move something to the cloud and there's a new service that comes out 3 months from now. If I'm not continually looking back at the platform and the features and functionality of it and reevaluating how I deployed resources previously, then I'm not understanding when there are new and better ways for me to accomplish my goals that would either provide me additional functionality or reduce costs. And it just lets you grow easier. You know, when businesses grow and expand or contract and they invest in physical infrastructure, they have to invest in excess capability in order to meet that demand. Well, that's not the case in cloud. Your cloud spend is going to match how much of it you're consuming. So if you have a seasonal business or something that changes over time, you know, there is potentially a really good fit for it in cloud for you to get good value. So here are a couple things that you can do to increase your cloud capability right now. The first thing that I always tell customers to do is assign a cloud champion. And you need to have cloud champions both on the executive side and technical side. It could be the same person. Think of these as roles, not necessarily people. But someone needs to be driving the conversation and owning it and saying, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And then the organization needs to buy into that if you're going to be successful. I have some links here. These are for AWS and Azure and Google's cloud platform, links to the industry and case study solutions that they have published. And here's why you should go visit these. They show how all your competitors who are using cloud are using cloud. They show how other businesses that are like yours, other organizations like yours, are using cloud, what they're getting out of it. So do some research. This helps you kind of define the pie in the sky of what could we do. And oftentimes you're going to have this conversation in collaboration with the business side of your organization. This isn't necessarily just IT. We're talking about innovating net new capability. And then research advanced cloud capabilities. And this is what I was talking about earlier, the artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things. So many of my customers move to the cloud and then they don't leverage those capabilities and get new value out of it. They move huge SQL databases and applications to the cloud, and then they never think about integrating them with, you know, Power BI to produce dashboards and mash data together from different data sets that can create fantastic new tools for the organization. So that's a couple things you can do right now to increase the capability of your organization with cloud. Next, I am going to talk about cloud maturity. And here's what I mean by maturity. I mean the way that you're leveraging cloud. If you do a simple lift and shift and you don't optimize and do any automation and you just put your workloads up there and you let them go, you're at the bottom of the maturity curve. If you start leveraging cloud native application interfaces and you refactor your stuff so that it's you know, platform as a service instead of infrastructure as a service, then you're on the other end of the maturity spectrum. And most everybody falls somewhere in between. So ways that you can increase your maturity in cloud start with education. And note on the left box here, I talk about the Open Group Cloud Ecosystem Reference Model for Enterprise Architecture and ITIL and Cloud Adoption Frameworks. Each of the vendors has those. these really help you with the high-level strategy of how you're going to go and adopt a cloud platform. It helps you through the service design and management and helps you do it in a standard, consistent way according to best practices. This is not necessarily super technical work, the cloud methodologies. It's really more conceptual. How's the right way to do this? How should we structure it? And then online learning. This is your normal technical learning. Each of the vendors has good content out there. They have YouTube videos. They have videos on their own websites. They have labs that you can use. You can certainly get free trials and demos from all of the vendors. And here's the trick. Give your people the time to go take the learning, but provide them guidance on what the right learning is. You know what they need to be able to do, and you need to help them refine their targeted learning so that it's something that's going to benefit the organization. And then reward them for doing that learning. When they complete an online class or they achieve a new certification, make a big deal about it. You make it public. Post it somewhere. Send them a tchotchke or something. Let them know this is something that we really value, and we appreciate you doing the extra hard work of making this happen. And then staff up and partner. The reality is that a lot of our customers just don't have the staff and expertise they need in order to adopt cloud with any kind of maturity. Some of them do, especially bigger organizations, but on the smaller side and mid-market, there's a challenge getting good cloud resources even now. And you may need to augment your staff with contractors, or you may need to go out to a systems integrator like Insight is, and get help if you need help. There's plenty of choices out there. We're fantastic at this, so are others out there. Don't hesitate to reach out and get help. And then the last one here, meet with the vendor platform sales and adoption teams. Here's what that means. It means reaching out to Microsoft, reaching out to Amazon and Google. Find out who their business sales teams are in your area. They have fantastic free resources and guidance available to you. Yes, it's going to be salesy in many of the cases, but there's stuff that they can give you that you can't get anywhere else. And a lot of times you'll get, free demos, lab environments, free consumption for a monthly basis for a year or something like that. So make sure you meet with them and get on their radar and tell them what you're doing. And often they're very helpful. Once you've done some of that initial work in getting your education, you need to start looking at how you're going to move workloads into the cloud. And to do that, there's some evaluation that you need to do. Not everything is a great fit for cloud. Hopefully that's not a surprise. We've done research with IDC, I believe, that said that many of our customers are repatriating some portion of their cloud workloads. That means bringing it back to their on-premises data centers. And the reason why, in most cases, is because they had unexpected complexity or cloud spend. They didn't do the upfront planning and design that was necessary in order to have an orderly, well-managed migration to cloud, and now they're paying for it. That goes back to the curve that I showed you early on, right? So how you do that is you align your workloads to the cloud and evaluate them. And oftentimes, our customers don't even have a full inventory of everything they have on premises. So that's really where you need to start, is making sure you have a good asset management database, that you know what you have, and that you have done the work to figure out who application owners are, what the requirements are of those applications. Is anybody still using them? Where is the infrastructure for the application? There's a lot of just general discovery work and documentation on the front end. And sometimes that's often the most daunting part of the whole thing for people that are starting their cloud journey. Next, look at use cases. What things do you envision your organization doing in cloud? Are you going to move one of your data centers to the cloud because you've got a data center maintenance contract ending and you don't want to renew? Another one is, a business contracts or expands for whatever reason. It could be an acquisition or a divestment, whatever. And I need to be able to move stuff out of a current data center and into a cloud, so I don't have to build a new data center, so that then I can divest that infrastructure that I just moved to the cloud along with a company and make it easy for them to move. For whatever reason, whatever your cloud use cases are, you need to go out and identify what they are. And then you really need to create a decision matrix. What determines where an application should live? Should it live on premises, in a data center? Should it be in a colo? Should it be in a public cloud? Which public cloud? Why would you choose one versus the other? Once you have that decision matrix, you can pump your applications through it to come up with decisions about where they should go. Now, you still need to determine what order and how they should go. And that's really what the rest of these are. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I talk about mapping your application dependencies. I talk about rationalizing the app for transformation. So that's understanding the application and its design well enough so that I can identify the best cloud infrastructure for it. That might be transforming from IaaS to platform services. Good candidates there often are IIS web services, Active Directory, databases, SQL. There's, for most all of the vendors, good solutions for that don't require you to run an operating system on the cloud side. Once you've done that, you can build out your 5 R's of what you're going to do with your applications, and you can start planning the bundles and sprints for how you would move stuff to the cloud, and you can prioritize, where's the low-hanging fruit that would provide the most value to the organization, and what would be harder and we should wait on. I mentioned a little earlier about matching the capability and performance of applications, and here's what that means. If you look as we go right over time, costs increase, and the red line is normal CapEx expenditures. Every 3 to 5 years, you have to buy new infrastructure, or if you exceed capability, your capacity, you have to buy out of band with your normal renewal cycle, additional infrastructure. So when you do that, you're having to overbuy infrastructure for a particular, potentially variable demand on the infrastructure. So you're overpaying. Cloud helps you match that very closely through automation and scaling, elasticity. And this just really shows how costs over time, if you choose a public cloud option, can match the requirements of the organization. Tips you can use today. research the various cloud delivery models and methodologies. So not all of these are going to apply to your organization. Some of them will, some of them won't. Older versions of ITIL, if you're using them, using ITIL did not include any cloud in it. The latest version 4 does. There's certainly lots of different ways for you to organize IT service delivery, IT service management. Make sure you're using some of those best practices. Take some introductory online classes, get a cloud subscription, set up a lab, make sure you put governance on the lab so that it doesn't turn into an organically growing monster. Begin rationalizing your environment. So that's the alignment process that I talked about. What is the criteria for developing the decision matrix for where applications should go? And then make a plan with a timeline, knowing that it's going to be a living document and it's going to change based on your maturity and the needs of the business, your ability to transform. It's painful to transform, and you all have day jobs, and asking you to do something new and transform how your organization leverages IT, it's a stretch. Unless you have the ability to go out and hire new staff to do it, in which case, fantastic. Move on to ways to decrease costs in the cloud. So reducing the cost of services in the cloud comes in a couple different ways. As you mature how you're leveraging the cloud, the costs will naturally decrease. So here's an example. If I have an on-premises virtual machine that's running Windows and it's running SQL, and I move to the cloud, we talked about this earlier about how you can move to PaaS. If I change it so that I'm providing that SQL database to my application using a platform as a service in a cloud, I don't have an operating system to manage. Think about that for a minute. What does it mean to not have an operating system to manage? It means that you don't have the management overhead associated with Windows or Linux. It means that you don't have the complexity. You don't have the troubleshooting. You don't have the patch management, the virus software. All of that is the responsibility of the cloud provider. You can add certainly additional security to stuff that's running in the cloud, but in most cases, the services provided by the platform providers do that very, very well. So data center is not cloud, and if you don't treat it like cloud, if you don't treat cloud like data center rather, then you're going to get more out of the platform. Optimize, automate, and refactor. Just kind of hitting those same topics. Those are the three big ones. When you move to the cloud, if you have to do a lift and shift, and you can't optimize as you lift and shift, at the very least, document what you know about the applications and infrastructure that you're moving up so that you can go back and analyze it and come up with a plan for how you're going to optimize it. You should have that plan on how you're going to optimize before you start moving infrastructure. And it should either be a part of moving that infrastructure to the cloud, or you should have a plan for how it's going to happen, because if you don't, the optimization isn't going to happen, and you're going to have ballooning cloud costs, and it's just going to grow out of control. Look at automation. You have to understand what your applications need well enough so that you can automate when those services are available. Here's an example. You have a monthly finance batch process. that does end-of-month bookkeeping. Well, do you need to have that batch process running and the infrastructure it lives on running 24/7? Or could you maybe just turn it on for that last week of the month and have it do its work then and only pay for 1 week out of a month for that infrastructure? That's kind of a new way to do stuff. And then digitally transform. And refactoring kind of goes with that. You know, if you're gonna move to the cloud, you might as well start using some of the capabilities there, right? Don't just assume that you can't do anything more with it than you could with an on-premises data center. Start leveraging that artificial intelligence and machine learning and the paths. That's how you get the value out of cloud. It really is. There's lots of ways that you can control costs. They range from optimizing your licensing, right-sizing what you're using in cloud, automation, governance, putting in to play the good foundational governance that's required to make sure that your cloud grows in a way that's planned and repeatable and reportable and supportable over time. It's an opportunity to consolidate. Maybe you have multiple data centers and you've got a disaster recovery data center and a primary data center. And you could consolidate all those into a single public cloud where the DR functionality that you need is built into the platform. Well, there's an opportunity for you to reduce complexity. And then use the cost management tools. All these vendors provide cost management tools for getting controls and reporting implemented so that you can really understand what's going on in your cloud environments. And make sure you turn those on. And even if you're not going to charge back and show back to your organization, turn on the features so you can at least start tracking how cloud is being consumed, and make sure that as you're putting resources in cloud, you're doing the tagging and other stuff that's necessary in order for that reporting to provide good data. So, the good news about cloud cost management, there's lots of reporting options. You can automate. There's monitoring and alerting. You can put in quotas to manage usage. You can optimize. It's elastic. You can scale it. You have new licensing options there, which can be fantastic for organizations that don't have huge capital. And it really just gives you new capability here that you can use to manage how IT spend happens. Now, the bad news about cloud cost management is really the same list. There are lots of reporting options. There are lots of tools to identify over-provisioned workloads. Automation is hard. Monitoring and alerting can be super annoying if you don't set it up right. You have to understand how to limit usage. And optimizing and scaling up and out, it sounds a lot easier than it is in some cases. Some applications just aren't designed for that. So some of this is hard, and that's the reason why not everybody does it well. And this kind of goes back to get help if you need it, because it will save you in the long run. Ways you can reduce your spend right now. Turn on those passive cost management features like I just said. Make sure you're getting that reporting. Make sure all of your resources are tagged at creation and enforce that policy. Use policies and role-based access control to limit who can use the cloud and how much. And then if you already have stuff moved out to the cloud, review what's out there to make sure that it's sized optimally. you may be, maybe you have VMs running out there that are only hitting, 15% CPU utilization. Well, you're paying for a full CPU. Is there an opportunity for you to maybe merge that particular server with another server so that you're spending more effectively? It just requires you to understand what you're doing. I'm going to talk a little bit now about decreasing IT complexity. I went through this a little bit earlier about aligning your workloads and rationalizing them. One of the best ways for you to decrease complexity is to build that solid foundation and create a decision matrix. Well, here's kind of what a decision matrix might look like. You're going to need to go through each of benefits, risks, opportunities, and value and decide what's in it for you. What is this going to do for your organization? Benefits might be you have new technologies that you don't have on premises right now. Maybe you haven't updated your infrastructure in several years and you need a performance boost, and you would have to purchase new infrastructure on premises in order to get the performance you need. But if you move to the cloud, you could choose whatever CPU model that you need and get capability there. And when you're there, refreshes are easier. You're not going to have that 3 to 5 year reinvestment in infrastructure. It oftentimes is the case that if I have a VM or service running in the cloud, that for me to increase its capability, all I need to do is assign a different CPU to it or add memory to it. Maybe that requires a restart. That's, potentially the end of that 3 to 5 year huge maintenance cycle that companies have, or at least it can decrease it for some of their infrastructure that goes to the cloud. There's lots of opportunities here. We talked about a little bit of that earlier. Will it let you simplify how you're doing IT? Is it going to give you net new capabilities? What would happen if you refactored and rewrote applications to take advantage of cloud-native APIs? You could start leveraging AI and ML. But you do need to know the risks. A lot of our customers are worried about vendor lock-in, and that happens more when you start talking about platform services and native cloud services and APIs. And I understand that they would like to use containers or VMs that maybe are easy to transport between cloud providers, and sometimes that's a part of an organization's decision to do multi-cloud with multiple cloud providers instead of locking into a single vendor. But just keep in mind that adds additional complexity, and you've got to have more skill sets in order to do that and manage that. So there's some challenges there as well. And then value. What kind of value do you get out of that application by moving it to the cloud? Maybe it would prevent you from developing code that would take an extra 3 months before an application could be released. And maybe you have a new product launch. And if you start leveraging cloud-native functionality with an API, maybe you wouldn't have to write that code, and you could deliver that app to market much faster. So create your decision matrix. You need to know the metrics associated with what makes a good cloud workload versus not a good cloud workload. And everything from the operating system. Some operating systems, older ones, are not a good match and have to be upgraded. to the dependencies within the applications and between databases and applications. Things like that are going to determine whether something is a good fit or not. And don't think of moving to the cloud as a single event. It's something that occurs over time, and you move what makes sense as it makes sense. Doing a overnight lift and shift is just not possible when you're talking about dozens, hundreds, or thousands of servers. It just, it's not possible in any kind of way that makes sense. So phase it so that you're moving things when they make sense to move. Some things you don't move, some things you do. In this example, I have some current infrastructure. One app is just staying on current infrastructure. You see it going, app 2 going off to the right. But app 1 in phase 2 gets moved to a private cloud in a new colo. And then phase 3, it stays there. But in phase 4, it moves into AWS. And that might be 1, 2, 3 years down the line. I don't have to do it all at once. Don't try to boil the ocean. Some things are going to go straight to cloud. Some things are going to stay on-prem and colo. Hybrid is the right cloud solution for pretty much everybody, except for some small startups that can manage to just run 100% in the cloud. Tips you can use today. Concentrate on the art of the possible. That's one of those cliche terms, I know, but it really, to me, speaks to how you choose to do things that make sense, that are realistic for you to accomplish in a reasonable amount of time. So, like I said, don't boil the ocean. Do what makes sense. Do it as it makes sense. Use automation and workflow. There are fantastic capabilities when you get your services in the cloud to automate help desk and service desk provisioning of new infrastructure and build workflow into it for approvals. You can set up administrators so that they only have admin after submitting a form for a request that goes through an approval process with a group that has to, click yes in order for that person to get admin. And then it's only checked out to them for, 2, 3, 4 hours, and then they lose that capability. That's, when you automate it, realistic in, something that you could do as an organization to govern how you're leveraging cloud. Use blueprints, templates, infrastructure as code, policies, quotas. Use the tools that are available for you to guide, limit, and repeatedly deploy cloud infrastructure in a way that is supportable over time. And get back to the basics. Think about how adding a cloud platform that can deploy new infrastructure in minutes might change your change management procedures. If right now you have a change management cab call that happens maybe every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. Well, if I'm a dev and it's Wednesday after a CAB meeting and I have something that I'm ready to deploy, should I wait another 2 weeks before I can deploy something that maybe is fairly routine? You probably need to look at how you're doing some things and see whether they still make sense in an infrastructure where you have a new platform. I'm going to go through a little cost example. We're nearing the end of our time. This is not something I'm going to go into depth on, but I'm just going to show you an example. The cost that I'm going to have in this example is based on 5 servers, each of which have 4 CPUs and 16 gigabytes of RAM. The in-use hours that these servers have is 20 hours during releases, 2 of every 3 months, and 12 hours a day at all other times. And you'll see why that's important here in a minute. So in this case, I'm treating cloud like a data center. I'm lifting and shifting. I'm choosing the next larger CPU and memory size. This is the minimum that's going to meet the requirements that I have for on-premises. That's the bottom one there, where it has 8 CPUs, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and a terabyte of storage. This is treating cloud like a data center. This is really my maximum cost, and I am failing if I am paying this much for something that I move to the cloud. If I simply use reserved instances where I commit to having some infrastructure over time with one of the cloud providers, generally it's like 1 year or 3 years, you can get significant savings over that retail cost. You know, in this case, it reduced it to $580 per month per server. If I automate the availability of my VMs according to when they're going to be used, you can see here most months I'm using 20 hours. You know, some months I'm using 12 hours. My costs follow the pattern of usage. That further reduces the amount that I'm paying. If I start matching the performance and instance sizes of the VMs and infrastructure that I'm running to the requirements of the applications that are running on them, then you get that squiggly red curve for costs instead of the straight red line above it for costs. So you're scaling the costs with the workload. You can see here I'm almost at half of that initial retail cost. Now, what if I put all those together? Look at it. 56% discount. I'm paying less than half of what the retail price is if I move this workload to the cloud, these servers to the cloud, in the way that makes sense. This is treating cloud like cloud. Not everything makes sense to automate and optimize this way, but if you move to the cloud and you're not doing this, you're forking out more money than you need to for something that you're not using as much as you could. You can see here cost savings over time. This is over the course of 12 months, saving $23,000. The last example I have here is if I have infrastructure that I purchase and an application requires more infrastructure, you can see here bursting demand where I'm exceeding the capability of my infrastructure. I have to go buy new infrastructure if it's on premises. If I'm in the cloud, I have to increase the instance size of the virtual machine or service that I'm running to handle that additional load. If I use scaling, I am accommodating both the excess compute that I need, and when I am not using all of that compute, I'm scaling back to a lower level, so I'm saving more over time. If that's all I do, I still get $5,000 or more in savings. So I hope that served as a good demonstration of how mature use of cloud can really make a difference to your organization. So I talked about this a little bit earlier. IT really is now a partner. Information technology is expected to do more now than ever before. IT departments are asking to provide net new capabilities to the organization to drive new value, and they're being expected to do it with less resources, with less personnel, less training, and bringing in partners and other things only take you so far. But it's a challenge. It really is. And cloud is one of the tools that you can use to address that challenge. And if you're not using cloud and you're being asked to do more with less, then you may be missing an opportunity. IT isn't just a cost center anymore, right? There's a lot that you can be doing to deliver value to your organization. And remember, cloud is the foundation, and you can help deliver the capability to innovate, but you're going to need to partner with the business so that they can actually use that to go faster and do more. You're going to have to partner with the dev teams and understand what their requirements are and how they would like to use information technology and help them move more quickly with it. So, to summarize some of the ways that you have to manage costs and unlock cloud's potential, build a best practice scaffold and governance and put in access controls, turn on the cost management, use that reporting, standardize template, use policies, set quotas and limits. These are not terribly hard. You do have to understand how they work. It's a little different for each platform, but they're good tools. And if you have multiple clouds, there are cloud management platforms that will help you with managing costs across them. I don't generally recommend those because they add another level of complexity, but some organizations need it when they are going deep into multiple clouds. Do the optimization and automation. It makes sense. Turn stuff off when you're not using it. Make sure you're using the best licensing options available. If you have especially Microsoft Windows licenses, you could have a significant discount off of your cloud spend just by making sure you check one box when you're turning on a new VM. And identify as early as you can good candidates for refactoring. Like I say here, preferably before you migrate. At the very least, after you migrate, if you lift and shift, make sure you capture what you need to know about the stuff that you just moved so that you can understand what you need to do to mature its usage of cloud over time. So to review today, we talked about 4 ways you can get more out of cloud. You can envision the future and develop new capabilities. You can increase the knowledge that you have around cloud, which will increase how mature you are in your usage of it. You can use best practices and the tools that are available to control costs. And you can minimize complexity and do things like removing operating systems from the mix. All these things are going to go into creating more value out of public cloud for your organization. And that wraps it up. I'm going to look at the chat here and see if there are questions. And in the time that we have left, just a minute or two, I'll answer what I can. But I do appreciate everybody joining today and look forward to talking to you guys more about your cloud journeys and how we can help. Amanda, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you for attending today's webcast. An on-demand version of this webcast will be available within 2 to 3 days. You will receive an email notification once the recording is available. Thank you again for participating and have a great day.